Welcome to the Small Giants Fishbowl. This topic is building culture in virtual teams. Positive workplaces don't happen by accident. Purpose-driven leaders know that behind the best company cultures, you'll find leaders who put in consistent, intentional hard work to build this aspect of their organization. In this month's Fishbowl, we'll hear from 2019 Forbes Small Giants leader, Behfar Jahanshahi, on how InterWorks culture grew and flourished as its team became a distributed workforce. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. So my name's Behfar. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called InterWorks, and we are headquartered in Stillwater, Oklahoma. I started the company in 1996 when I was in college. And just to give you a little bit about my background, because I think it'll help maybe set the stage for some of what we're going to talk about today. For me, I grew up in a world loving tech, and today my kids have iPads, and back when I was growing up, the world didn't really work that way. Most people didn't have a computer, and I got into technology mostly because I wanted to play video games, but through that process, I sort of accidentally discovered that I really like learning about the guts of what makes a computer work. I love learning about things like coding. And so, at elementary school, I had a Commodore. I learned how to program, again, because I wanted to play games, but I was mostly just transposing code from a book to the computer, and accidentally discovered how to code in a language called BASIC. In junior high, I wanted to build or to have a computer, and back then, you didn't have an Apple store or Dell.com. You went to your local computer store, and if you wanted to save a few $100s, you built the computer yourself. So we didn't have a lot of money. It was cheaper to build ourselves, and so I ended up doing that and learning a lot about computer hardware along the way. And then when college rolled around, this video game called Doom came out, and the significance of that game was that you could run around and play with other people if you were on the same network or if you dialed into one another. And so what happened was I wanted to play, all my buddies wanted to play, none of them had modems or network cards, and because they didn't have those things, I was the one installing them, setting them up, getting everyone connected to play. And after doing this weekend after weekend, night after night, I ended up, unofficially becoming tech support for their parents, for friends, for anyone that had a computer problem. And it sort of had this epiphany along the way of I really like the problem solving. I like the troubleshooting. It wasn't just about playing the games. It was figuring out these problems. And at some point it became very routine. So I went to the local computer store and said, look, you guys are in the business of building computers. I want to do the services work for your business customers. And so they turned over their services work, and that's when InterWorks was born. I started in college. It was just for fun. And it was never intended to be my real job. And by the time I got my bachelor's and master's, I thought, why am I interviewing at IBM and Accenture and all these other places? I'm having a lot of fun doing what I'm doing. And so over the years, I thought a lot about, well, why am I doing this? What is the purpose of InterWorks? And long story short, for me, I realized, I liked bringing my friends into this. I liked the kind of work we were doing, and I liked doing great work to the point that people were saying, this is great, thank you, let me introduce you to this other person that needs your help. And so, over a decade, we came up with this mantra, because what happened was we were just growing. And, the world likes to celebrate growth, and that was not really the thing I cared about. I just wanted to have fun. And that's how I would describe it to everyone. And it's hard to mission and rally around this idea of let's go have fun. So we came up with this mantra of do the best work for the best clients with the best people. And what I've always said is that as long as those conditions are true, I'm happy. We're not trying to be in every city. We're not trying to have 10,000 consultants. We're not We're not trying to sell this thing in 10 years. It's just, let's go have fun, do the best work with the best people, for the best clients. So we're a tech consulting company in Oklahoma. We have around 230 employees globally. In Oklahoma, where we have the largest density, we do a lot of traditional IT services. So this is storage, virtualization, setting up your email server, coming up with disaster recovery plans. That's mostly a regional play. Globally, we do data analytics and data consulting services. So data architecture, helping people do more with data, right? So you have data in 10 different places. You want to bring it together and visualize it. We help people do that. We don't staff. We are, as you guys all know, we want to be what I call a small giant, or what Bo calls a small giant, and that definition suits us really well, because we're not trying to go grow in every city. We want to be small. We want to have a big impact, and we want to leverage our expertise and have a big reach. So we have pockets of people in Chicago, and we have a small WeWork office in Portland, and we have a WeWork office in London, and we have a WeWork office in Sydney. And in any given location, we may have a few to a dozen or less people. I'll just stop there.
That's perfect, and we love that mantra. And you're definitely a small giant. So now I want to talk about this, what you just mentioned, where you have a few people, you have some WeWork offices, but you also have an office in Oklahoma. Can you tell us a little bit about what that looks like? Does everyone work from a WeWork office? How are people spread out? Just to give us an idea.
Yeah, so, the company started in '96 in Stillwater when I was in school. So post-graduation, the growth was all in Stillwater. And at some point, we picked up an office, and we got an office in Stillwater. So it's a 2-person, then a 5, then a 10, and it kept growing over and over. That organically led to just sprawl to places like Oklahoma City and Tulsa, which are about an hour drive away from Stillwater. And so next thing you know, we're hiring a person in Oklahoma City, and we started getting more growth there. So eventually we had enough density in the Oklahoma City to say we should have an office here. So Stillwater, we have a building that we built and own. Oklahoma City, we have just a traditional, 5-year, 10-year lease, something like that. And then same thing happened in Tulsa. So what happened was, for a decade, we were, just loosely a decade, we were in Oklahoma, and no real plans to grow beyond that. There weren't plans to not grow beyond that. It was just, taking it one day at a time. And what happened was, when we started getting into the data analytics space and partnering with companies like Tableau, they really valued our services. And the next thing we knew, we were, in the IT space, we tend to play in the small and medium business world. In the BI and data space, it's mostly enterprise. And so what happened was, this company, Tableau, really liked our services and started introducing us to all of their customers. So next thing you know, we're the Stillwater, Oklahoma company flying to California to places like Cisco Systems to help them roll out an analytics platform. So a decade of just Oklahoma, and then what happened is we started hiring a person in San Diego, and a person in Chicago, and a person in Rhode Island, and a person in New York. And there was no sort of, we had just cast a wide net and said, this is what we do. If you want to work here, come on over. And as qualified candidates came in, we just brought them on if they were willing to travel. And for the most part, everyone outside of Oklahoma had a high degree of travel. I mean, it was at a minimum 50%. So they were on the road all the time, and we all of a sudden were met with this new challenge of having kind of road warriors. And what does that do to the culture, and how do we keep them close? And And over the, if you sort of fast forward to today, what happened was we had so much going on in Portland that just organically we ended up with a lot of people there. And we said, well, why don't we go consider something like a WeWork? And if you're not familiar with the WeWork concept, I mean, it's co-sharing office space. So they have these incredible Class A office spaces all over the world. I mean, literally all over the world. In many cities, they have many locations. So in New York, I don't know what the number is, but I'd imagine there's probably 10 plus WeWorks there. And you can go and say, I need an office for 2 people, and you can sign a month-to-month or a 1-year lease or whatever that may be. If you're going to grow out of it, you can just shut that office down and get a bigger space. And so they offer incredible flexibility, and it comes with the conference rooms and, great space, coffee machine, beer on tap, all the things you'd want in a great space. And then for the people that are just absolutely remote but need a place to work, they offer this idea of like a hot desk. So you don't have an office, you can just walk in, sit down, and go. So our model today is when it makes sense and we have density, let's get an office at a WeWork. And then for anyone else outside of Oklahoma that's outside of a WeWork zone, they work from home or they work from a client site. Did that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. That painted a great picture.
Okay.
So now having a virtual team or a dispersed team has a lot of benefits. You have a wider talent pool. You have arguably lower overhead. I think you might touch on that. But for companies that really care about their culture, like everyone on here today, there's that added challenge of keeping people plugged into your culture and your values no matter where they are. So can you talk a little bit about what you've done over the years to try and maintain that no matter where people are?
Yeah. So I think for us, because we're based in Oklahoma, I mean, at the end of the day, we are in a state that has a lower cost of living, and you can go to a bar and get a $3 beer, right, as opposed to New York where it might be $10 if you're lucky, and so the cost of living is low. So the idea of like us having a remote employee almost anywhere, for us, it's not about it's not directly about the economics, because they're most likely going to be in a tier 1 or tier 2 city, and in a place like New York, I mean, they're or anywhere in California or Chicago. I mean, it's just a different market, and cost of living is very different. So those people tend to cost us more just from a pure apples to apples salary comparison. I would say too that the idea that, well, this person works from home and they don't need an office, so you're saving a lot of money there. I think while that's true, if we want to kind of, keep the culture tight and keep people close, it does mean that there are other things that might offset that cost savings. So there may be dinners or regular get-togethers, or hey, why don't you fly into one of the offices and spend some time there? And today I'm in Seattle for meetings, but I'm here for 2 nights at just a standard Hilton, and that hotel bill will be $800+, right? So it's not necessarily cheap just to fly someone to one of your locations where you have density and have an office just to spend a few days. So I don't, for us, we don't really do a lot of cost analysis on is it cheaper or more expensive. My guess is it's probably not cheaper, and it might be actually more expensive. The reason we started looking outside of Oklahoma is because what happened was, in early days of us getting into analytics, we were one of the only people doing what we do today. And so we were flying all over the world to deliver these services. And it was a lot of fun in early days. But what happens is when people are on the road for 1 year, 2 years, at some point they go, okay, I'm ready to not be on the road all the time. And so we knew that something was going to have to change, or those people were going to go, I can't sustain this lifestyle. The other thing is, as the market became more saturated with people doing similar work, what would happen is if, all of a sudden we can't charge someone for a flight and hotels to go to somewhere like Chicago when they have 10 other options in the city. So we needed to kind of localize for a lot of different reasons. And the other one, it was just kind of a thing that naturally happened. So I don't think I answered your question in its entirety, but
that's okay. No, that's
what the question was.
Yeah. So to talk about what are some of the ways throughout the years that you have made sure that people were plugged into
got it.
No matter where they were, some strategy.
Yep. Yeah. So when we were all in Oklahoma, it was frankly a lot easier. It took, the analogy I use is kind of like this concept of burning calories. It didn't take a lot of calories to keep things tight, keep the culture tight, and just kind of you didn't have to do quite as much planning, right? I mean, we're all there together. I should also say I'm 43. When I started the company, I wasn't 21 yet, right? So, and the average age kind of hovers around my age. And so in early days, we're all single. The things we wanted back then were different than today. So, the majority was single. The get-togethers were more about let's go out and have beers. Let's go. We're all out till midnight, 2 a.m., whatever. Today at 9 p.m. I'm in bed, right? And I have 2 kids. So the type of things we did as the company evolved changed as well. But when we were all together in one office, we really took for granted how much people are just in the know because we're all around one another. So you just kind of say things, people hear things. You don't have to be as deliberate about communication. Everyone just kind of knows what's going on, whether you mean to or not. And certainly relative to if you have people far away. So as we started bringing more people on, I mean, even to this day, we find we still have a gap in what people know, and we have to be much more deliberate about communicating out. I think that today we do a few things to keep people culturally close. So within each team, we have this idea of this concept of team meetups, and so we're broken into small teams, and we basically say, look, we want to make sure that each team is staying together and doing things together, and that if you're working from home, you're having regular interaction with other people at InterWorks. Everyone's personality is different. In some cases, there's people who are totally fine being at home 2 weeks in a row, and there's others who say, I'm going crazy. I need to talk to people. I need to see people. And so what we try and do today is go, look, let's every month kind of have a check, a sanity check. Like, is everyone in your group close? Do they feel a part of the company? And if not, what are we doing about it? And we don't have a single answer that fits everyone, but I'll just kind of throw out a few examples. We have an office in Portland. We have, let's just say half a dozen people that work there regularly. And then we have someone in San Francisco who's remote, and there's no office there. And for us, we go, why don't we bring that person from San Francisco to our WeWork in Portland and have them just spend a few days there. And when they're there, they may do things like, grill out on the WeWork grill together, or they may go out to dinner, they may go spend time at lunch together. We may host activities in the office with our clients and try and logistically coordinate it all so it's happening at the same time, but to make sure they feel like they're part of the family. In places like Stillwater, Oklahoma, or Tulsa, we have more density. I mean, we have people who, they'll make intramural basketball teams or softball teams, or there'll be a bowling function. Everyone's going out to lunch on a regular basis. We're just being thoughtful about saying, are we keeping people close? And if not, what are we doing about it? And we're not 100% on this, right? I mean, at some point we hire people who go, I can work remote and happy to do it. And then when they actually do it, and and it's week over week, month over month, they go, I can't do this. So, you know, sometimes there's not a good answer, or we're not prepared to do the things that may need to be done to make that person feel more connected. So I think because we're not 10,000 people or 2,000 people, you know, we can kind of cater what we do to the audience somewhat.
I got a question here from the chat around the idea of density, and when you go to a WeWork as opposed to just people working from home. Can you tell us a little bit about that, what that threshold looks like?
Yeah, so if we have a person in a city and they say, I'd like an office, we won't do that. So as a company, we've decided, look, I mean, because when we're hiring, we set the expectation, hey, you're in a city where we have no one, and we're not going to go put an office there because we're hiring you. If you'd like to do that, you can go. You know, if you feel like that's something that's important to you, then you can do it. But we set the expectation on that we're not going to do that, and we ask a lot of questions in the interview process around, you know, are you sure you can work from home? Why do you think you can work from home? And I'll tell you, a very common answer is, well, I know I can work from home because at my job, you know, right now I get, you know, I can work from home 1 day a week or 2 days a week or whatever. And I'll really kind of challenge people on this and maybe even put them on the defensive a little bit about it, because I'll go, well, you know, what happens after 3 weeks? I mean, do you have the discipline to get out of bed, get ready, start your day? Because I think for a person like me, I would have that discipline for a week or 2 weeks. And then at some point it's, am I even getting out of my pajamas? Am I even taking a shower? Am I even, you know, and so it does take a special kind of personality who can do that. And it's not for everyone. So we try and get people to really think about it and go, you know, what is your home environment? Do you have an office? Are you going to have, if you have a 3-year-old at home, you know, are they going to be banging on your door? You're going to have a hard time saying, I'm on a call, go away. And so we just try and, you know, you get them thinking about that. So what happens is when we hire, like in Portland, for example, we had several people there. But all of them are going to client sites. At some point, we need a place to rally and for people to meet. So we don't have like this hard, set, fast number, but we basically said, look, we need people to meet regularly. We can't do it at our client sites. It's not practical. And we've got, you know, 6 people here. Why don't we go look at it? WeWork? And then it eventually became 7 people and 8 people. And so it really was more a function of, did it feel right? Our smallest office we have is in Sydney, and it's for 2 people. And normally we wouldn't get an office that size for 2 people, but in Sydney we have partners there that we're meeting with regularly, and we have for our sales guy, we want to set up a base, and as we have consultants coming in, we want from different parts of Australia, we want them to be able to come to a location to meet. We want a place to. Here's another selling point on WeWork. We host what we call office hours. We do a lot of in-person lunch and learn style activities or breakfast educational activities. And because WeWork has lots of different sized conference rooms, we can scale that up or down as we need. And so Sydney is the smallest office. We have 2, and so it's generally a function of like how often are we going to have people in the same place, and that needs to be what justifies it.
Okay.
I saw a question come by about contractors versus employees. Everyone's an employee. We don't have contractors.
Okay. So let's talk about some of these formal processes. You alluded a little bit to your recruiting, some of the things that you ask to try and make sure people are the right fit. One thing that you talked about before, you talked about how you run your one-on-ones and also how you utilize Slack and just some of the technology that you use. So can you tell us about your one-on-ones and also show us some of the technology that you use to stay in communication?
Yep. So in anticipation of this, I had some help getting some screen shares or screen grabs together. I can't show this stuff live because there's a lot of NDA content or, let's say, sensitive information and in here. So I'm going to put some things on the screen, and there may be some content blurred out, and that's why. So we use this tool called 15.5, and this is used for one-on-ones and let's say some level of sentiment analysis around how the company's doing. So there are a few different aspects to this, and I'm just going to break down how we use this tool. So with 15.5, we have the ability to go ask questions of the entire company. So these are things like, what are your priorities and how are they progressing? What went well this week? How are you feeling on a scale of 1 to 5? What are some of your biggest challenges? Some people find the questions really valuable because their weeks change quite a bit week over week. For other people, the questions can be quite repetitive because their week over week doesn't change very much. So they're looking at the question going, why am I getting the same question again? But what happens is when, and so we have a few different views of this. As a team lead, I can see how my team is doing. As an employee, I'm communicating thoughts and feelings on a regular basis with my immediate manager. And from my perspective, how the company feels and what challenges people have, I want to know about it across the whole company, so I can come in and look at that across the whole company. So the employee can feel like their information is private between them and basically anyone up the org chart, and they have the ability to hide what they're writing to they have the ability to limit it just to their immediate supervisors. That makes sense. So this is what a 15.5 looks like. In this case, they're due today. Only one person has submitted so far. This is Dan Murray, one of my direct reports. I went and looked at this beforehand just to make sure it was okay. And if I go into this, actually, I'm going to go into Stephanie's. So if I go into Stephanie's, I can see that she's feeling 5 out of 5. Now, Stephanie's not one of my direct reports. Lauren is. And then Lauren reports to Aaron. Aaron reports to me. So I can see this. I can come in here and like it. She's feeling great. Why not feel glad about that? And then she has her priorities for the week, or priorities period, and she's checking whether she's met those priorities or not. We have a new lady we brought. So Stephanie's an account exec. She's helping transition accounts to another lady named Carly, so she doesn't feel like she's transitioning fast, or it's not complete yet, so she's put an X on that. What went well this week? The Disney conference. We were at a Disney Analytics conference, so she's saying that went well. She closed out this deal. This other account's moving forward. What's your biggest challenge right now? And she's listing out her challenge, and then her managers, they're replying. And then within 15.5, there's this concept of high five. So these are people giving her a high five, saying, hey, Stephanie was great at this thing, and it's there for everyone to see within the company. So I like this because even though I may not talk to Stephanie directly or on a regular basis, I can come in here and go, how's she feeling? What kind of problems does she have? And if there are things I can do to help, I can just jump in and comment.
I had a couple, if I can jump in with a couple of questions, yeah. I think around this view specifically. So a question around, do you have your one-on-ones weekly, bi-weekly? Are they 30-minute calls? Can you tell us a little bit about how they're run?
Yeah, so I do my one-on-ones weekly, and the expectation is that most team leads are doing them weekly, and then some may drop down to bi-weekly. And the idea is, we actually borrowed this idea from something I heard that Twitter did, which was just get together with whoever you report to and meet and talk about what's going on, what's going well, what's not going well. If you have nothing to talk about, still meet to get together, because it's very rare that you're actually going to stare at someone and go, I have nothing to say. And so, you know, originally started as an idea of like, let's just make sure we're pausing to talk and stay in touch, right? And for me, some of the one-on-ones start out with just things that have nothing to do with the work, and then they ultimately lead to a work thing. Or if there's a lot going on, we might just sit down and we literally go, okay, let's go. You know, what do you got on your list? And so we use 15.5 to manage this as well. They have this concept of one-on-ones. And I can't open any of these up because there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot in them and things I don't necessarily want on a recording, right? But it might be with, just because he's first on the list, Aaron Comper, Director of Sales. So what are we doing about hiring? What are we doing about these challenges we're having? What are we doing about, you know, whatever it may be? And in this case, what I like about one-on-ones is I actually think, in doing it in this format, is I think it increases efficiency a lot. What I tend to do is if I have any question that pops into my head, I tend to want to pick up the phone or send an email or Slack someone immediately and go, hey, you know, just thought about this, what's going on? And this allows me to have some discipline around, if it's not a thing we need to talk about right now, I'm going to put it into the one-on-one. And then when we meet at some point this week or next, then I can just batch all this up and bring it all up at once. And then we can just, you know, bang through it. In this case, the mobile app is great, but I keep all thoughts and things that need to happen here. If they get done, you check it off. If they don't get done, it rolls forward to your next scheduled one-on-one. So yeah, I think it works really well. And I think what has actually happened because we've done it is there are very few surprises in the company. Everyone's staying in touch regularly, and as long as everyone's being, you know, somewhat honest, like people feel like they're relatively in the loop about how one another are feeling, good or bad. Yeah, so that's 15.5. Any other questions on this?
Yeah, there were a couple more, if you don't mind. So past it. Can you talk about the quality or honesty of the feedback that you get in this format, as opposed to if you were asking people directly in calls or in meetings?
Yeah, I don't know how accurately I can answer that question. I will say that the larger we get, the more I am probably seen as a CEO rather than a person, if that makes sense. And I think at some level, if you're newer here and remote, because there's not as much personal interaction between myself and that individual, they don't necessarily know how I'm going to react to something they say. I mean, I think in general, I'm pretty laid back. I want people to be really honest and open. They may not know that if they're new and far away, and so they know when they're writing something, their manager's going to see it, that person's manager, that person's manager. So, but I do feel like if people aren't feeling great, a lot of times I don't think they're going to mask that. They're not going to say, I'm feeling great, when they're feeling like something really sucks, right? So I think they might sugarcoat it, but I still think it makes its way into the messaging. So, I mean, I try and be very, so I have a recurring calendar reminder every Friday at the end of the day to go look at 15.5s. And if I'm disciplined about it, what I actually do is I'll actually get on a treadmill, and I use the mobile app, and I go through all the 15.5s, and I'm just hyper-focused on reading them. So I think for the most part, feedback is pretty honest within the company. I think feedback from my directs is very honest, or it's as honest in 15.5 as it would be in person. But I think I think it's been a great tool. I think as long as the adopt now, one of the risks is when people become disengaged, do they also stop using the tool? Mm-hmm. And so we're sort of mindful of who's using it and who's not, because that may in and of itself tell us something. Okay, cool. It also does a little bit of, I'm a little afraid to just start clicking around, because it'll do things like show you trends, you know, of how someone's feeling. So it'll show you, you know, because, you know, there's some people who every day is a 5 out of 5, right? And there's other people who every day is a 4 out of 5. And so it may not be something wrong. They just use a different measuring stick. So you can kind of get the trend or the sentiment analysis or the trend analysis on which way they're going. But I'll tell you, like for us, like if we see a 2 out of 5, we go, something is wrong. And there needs to be an intervention of some sort. Like someone needs to pick up the phone, or the manager, you know, better know what's going on. And if they don't, then that's a sign that there may be something we need to react to pretty quickly.
Okay. And no worries about not sharing it. We can picture it. Don't worry. Okay, I think that's all the specific questions around 15.5. There's a couple here around Slack, and even some around how do you help employees connect. So do you want to show us some of the next screenshots? I think that will cover it.
Yeah, actually, let me talk about how we try and some examples of ways we connect employees. So again, this varies from location to location, because it's a function of the complexion and makeup of the team, how often they see one another, and just what kind of traffic goes in and out of that office. So, and I'll tie some of this back to Slack in a minute. One of the coolest, so we had this concept of team meetups or get-togethers, and again, those vary quite a bit depending on what your team is. So I went to one in Chicago. We have a WeWork in Chicago, and what that group did was they said, hey, let's organize this thing called office hours. And what we do is we have our clients come in and they bring us their problems, and at no charge to them, we're going to, you know, we'll basically go in an office with them, get on the computer with them, and run through some of the problems they're having and help them work through it. And so what happened was we paired a senior and a junior person up. So now all of a sudden, and then when a client would come in, we'd take the senior and junior pairing and they go off and do the office hours session. And we booked a full day of that. So we were very deliberate about saying to everyone, hey, you know, don't go on site today. You're going to come and work out of the office. So again, we're deliberate about bringing people together, and there's a lot of just nice conversation that comes out of that. We had clients coming in, so it ended up being a marketing event. It ended up being a sales event. It ended up being a training event, because we're training our junior folks get exposure to these kind of challenges and working through them. Clients walk away happy, going, that was great. I really need InterWorks' help. And within the InterWorks Chicago community, we're building a stronger sense of community. That night, we all go out to dinner together, because we had some people who flew in for that. We go to a nice place. Again, great chatter comes up. We end up talking about how people track expenses and submit receipts, and that ultimately became one person suggested a tool called TurboScan, and it ended up being a tool as a company we adopted for use. The next day, we all went to a food bank and worked at a food bank for 4 hours as a team. And, you know, if you've done that sort of thing, you walk out of there feeling good about what you've done. Everyone feels great. We all got to bond and spend time together in that process. So we try and do something like, up to this point, we said try and do that like once a quarter. What happened was it became very prescriptive, and now I'm about to put out an announcement internally about this on Slack. We're going to change the format slightly. But we're basically saying to people, like, look, let's just make sure people feel connected. And if not, let's go do things like this to stay connected. So that's one example of how we sort of bring team together in Chicago. And again, what I love about it is it made incredible use of the time, and it checked a lot of boxes. I mean, it was goofing off, it was spending time together, and we have to, you know, do things for the community. We have to do things for our own InterWorks community, and again, sales, marketing, client relations, all of those packed into a day and a half. We leverage a tool called Slack. I'd imagine a lot of people are familiar with it, but if you're not, it looks something like this. It's just a simple messaging app. I'll kind of break down where all this is. But on the left-hand side, you have this concept of channels, and you can have public channels, which anyone can join, or you can have private channels, that's limited to whoever you invite in. And then you can message one or a group of people. So if you see on the bottom, I've got a message with Aaron, with Brian, with Chad, and in this case, Dustin and Stephanie. And so it's just a simple chat program. So we use this across the entire company. And one of the reasons I was glad to share the story of InterWorks and our mantras, because again, we have this concept of best clients, best work, best people. So do the best work for the best clients with the best people. And what we did was, when we set up Slack, the idea behind Slack is that it organically facilitates conversation. We're saying deliberately we want to have a place to post announcements, and we want to control or limit those announcements, because if there's too many, people they'll just start ignoring them. And then let's really promote our mantra: best clients, best people, best work. So we stuck an underscore in front of it, so it'd always be at the top of the list, alphabetically. And then we, as a company, we're very focused on what goes in there, and then we may create channels for specific clients we're working on, and then there's a whole lot of other things that end up going out there. So I'm just going to run through what some of these look like. Announcements are things like, hey, here's when our holiday party's coming up. We post a video. People can hit play on the video. They can add little emojis and have threaded comments in there. Anytime we hire someone new, we post. And we try and limit posts in the announcements page to at most 1 or 2 a day. We moved our WeWork location, and so I just there was a very short announcement about why, because people are probably wondering what the heck do we do that for. And then within each of these channels, best people, best work, best clients. So best people, the idea is to highlight the people within InterWorks. So on this particular day, this guy named Chad, when it was it rained and froze at the same time, so they had ice on their windshields. Chad went out and was cleaning, scraping ice off people's cars for him. And so Stephanie saw it, took a picture, posted it into the Best People channel, and said, thanks, Chad, for thinking of others on bad weather days. Best work is a client sending a note saying, hey, you guys did this incredible work, and I just want to give you this feedback about David Duncan. And so Jimmy, who's one of our other guys, was the recipient of that feedback, and he went and posted that on Best Work and tagged David Duncan in it. Best Clients is where we post things that, it's almost like a sales flash. Hey, we landed this client, here's how much they're spending, here's what they're doing, and here's kind of how that deal came together. So anytime we close an opportunity in Salesforce, the question gets asked, should we post something to this Best Clients channel? And that's what it's for. So again, this is just a further breakout of Best Clients, just deal. And then, Best People, I think, is something that really generates a sense of community, right? Because it may not have anything to do with InterWorks. It may be, I don't know the backstory on this middle picture, right? But Katie Bridges was in Chicago, and she's with Maxwell Croft, and they're saying, they were both she was in town for Pride weekend, and And it's a picture of those two together on a boat. And, you know, two other interworkers had maybe 6 days apart, so it's a picture of them, right? And so it ends up becoming kind of a Facebook feed with just your coworkers without all the noise of everything that's on a platform like Facebook. And so it just goes on and on. You know, we had a bike ride we did in Louisiana. Whoever wanted to go could go, and they rode across the state, so it's a picture there. We had one of our ladies from the UK visiting Singapore, and so this is a picture of one of our guys in Singapore with a lady from the UK having, you know, lunch or dinner together. And so again, it just keeps going and going and going. We had someone from Stillwater, Oklahoma, and Chicago, and bumped into people from InterWorks. And so it really builds a sense of, I think, family, community. You know, we're all kind of on the adventure together. Organically, all these channels started popping up on their own. I don't even know what half of them are. I didn't even know until the person prepared the slide for me that we had a channel called Hobby IW Casting. But people will go make channels around different hobbies or different things that they're interested in, gardening, cooking, whatever it may be. And you can sort of cruise through the channels and pick what you want to be a part of. There are two things that happened that I think are somewhat unique that I wanted to highlight. One of the guys created this channel called Bev Bash, and so he was very remote, and meaning he was in a city where we have no one and really had no plans of hiring additional people. And he said, hey, let's set up this thing called the Bev Bash. It's for everyone in the company, no matter where you are. And it's a way to bring remote employees together very deliberately. And we're going to do it every week, and we're going to pick a theme. And so you have different people who host it, and it's promoted internally. So in one case, they all found pictures of, they all found pictures of when they were younger, and they'd have to post it, and everyone would have to guess who it was. They'd have a picture of everyone drinking their favorite drink, or whatever it may be. And so it looks something like what this call is, right? So it's a bunch of people on a call together, just having a social hour on whatever the topic of choice is. Looks like the guy in the top right's in an airport. Some of these people are in an office. We have a couple of Europeans on the call, so that's been really cool. And then in the last couple of months, we have a lady in our office who's a yoga instructor and has gone pretty deep into that craft. And what she did was she started a virtual yoga session. So you can see in the left side, that's a Zoom room, just like the one we're in. And she will literally at noon on a Monday do something like host a virtual yoga session. And I'll literally walk out my office and see people at the end of the building doing yoga, and someone like Carly's hosting it remotely. And she, in this case, she's in Albany, New York. So that's Slack and 15.5 in a nutshell. But I think it's little things like that I think add up to keeping people close. Now, we'll say it is definitely more challenging to have a dispersed workforce than have everyone together. And again, I'll say it's not for everyone. I mean, we've had people who were great people and they loved InterWorks and we love them, and it just didn't work out because they're going, this has been fun. I can't keep doing it this way. And they're not necessarily interested in moving somewhere where they'd have more density, and we really have no way to accommodate them in a way that will make them happy. It might be a short-term solution, like 2 weeks, 1 month, but eventually they'll get back into that funk potentially. So it's not for everyone, but I think there are things we can do to help make it easier.
One of the other questions that has come in is about your onboarding process. So when you've recruited people, you've decided, okay, you think they're a right fit, they can handle a virtual environment. How do you onboard them in a way that gets them into the culture right away?
Yeah, so that is also a function of where they're going to ultimately be, and then their life situation or circumstances. So, for example, when we brought on an account exec in Australia, young single person, with and I say single just because they're they weren't necessarily going to leave someone to come to the States. So we said to them, hey, what do you think about coming here for a month or several weeks? For some people, they wouldn't be able to do that because there's pets, kids, spouse, whatever it may be. In his case, it works. So we said, well, just come stay here, work out of Stillwater for a while, work in Oklahoma City for a while. It may have been 2 weeks, it may be 3, it may be 4. So it becomes a function of like what is practical. Everyone has to spend at least 1 full week in Stillwater, and we really try and expose them to as many different people as possible and make sure they understand different aspects of the business. And they generally leave pretty excited and ready to go, sort of conquer the world. And then I think it becomes a function of where they're going after that. Instead of going to a place like Chicago, we're real big on trying to keep everyone culturally aligned, right? So the further they may feel out of that cultural center, the more we want to make sure to kind of pull them back in. But officially onboarding is 1 week, and then they're off to the races, and then we're again, deliberate about just making sure they're in regular contact and interaction with other people from InterWorks. There's some other things we do. For example, if you're on our BI team, and that would be the group that is outside of the state, we have, monthly, we had our call this morning, and it's an hour-long call, and it's just making sure everyone knows what's happening in the business. And so it's a good place to talk about what's going on, what's next, what's happened. And that is a very deliberate once a month sort of thing. We also do this thing called I think it's called like a new knowledge webinar or something like that. It's every Monday. Anyone can join. If they can't make it, there's a recording. And the idea is to go, here's something new you may not know. And it may be a tech thing. It may be another thing. But we're very deliberate today about having regular recurring events that give people a chance to get on a call like this and see one another and interact with one another. In early days, we didn't do that. So what happened was we had to crank up the number of physical get-togethers, and which came with a lot of logistical challenges and a high cost. And as we got more deliberate about regular recurring events, we were able to dial some of that down because people felt more connected.
Okay, awesome. I would love to end with this question that came through that I think is really interesting and almost a little bit philosophical. What is the benefit of people 500 miles apart from one another working on completely different clients? What is the benefit of them really knowing one
another? That's a great question. I think there are a few different ways to answer it. I'll answer it the way that I think is the most honest and true for me. I kind of started the call by saying I'm interested in doing things that sound fun. There are a lot of decisions we make that are not driven by the bottom line. It's certainly a consideration, right? But I love the idea. I love that we can say we're in Australia and London and Chicago, for example, and it is very cool to see when a client comes to us and they are a multinational, this big, Fortune 100 multinational, and they've got big problems, and little InterWorks can go and help them in multiple locations. And so a lot of this is not driven by you don't have to talk about the strategic value in being in all these time zones and how now we can provide 24/7 coverage, and all that is true. But what drove us going into these other markets and these other locations is there were lots of fun things to go do, and by being there, it enables us to unlock some of those things. So I would say that's the honest answer.
Okay, well that's it for this one. Check out more Fishbowls exclusively for the Small Giants community at smallgiants.org.